the search for answers into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance continues, over the last week, so many people still showing up and showing their support for Savannah.
We're not going to stop praying until we get an answer, and some closure.
41 days. That is how long an 84-year-old woman has been missing, and not a single arrest has been made. The FBI has persons of interest. A sheriff quietly went door to door asking neighbors if their internet went out the night she vanished. Cadaver dogs were just put on hold. And somewhere beneath the surface of this investigation, evidence exists that investigators are not telling the public. What is actually happening in Tucson, Arizona right now is far more disturbing than anything you have seen in the headlines. The ground that would not stay silent. Let's start with where things stand right now and why investigators believe the answer to this entire case may have been buried in the neighborhood the whole time. In the final days of February and into early March 2026, FBI agents returned to the Catalina Foothills neighborhood in Tucson and went door to door again. This was not the first time, but this time they were asking something very specific. They were not asking whether residents saw anything suspicious on the night of January 31st. They were asking whether anyone had noticed their internet connection going down that night. That detail alone should stop you cold. Because what investigators are now seriously considering is that whoever took Nancy Guthrie did not just show up with a mask and a gun. They may have come with technology. A damaged utility box was discovered just around the corner from Nancy's home. Neighbors confirmed that their home security camera footage from that night was simply missing or unavailable. Multiple systems, multiple homes, all in the same window of time. Former FBI agent Jason Pack went on record explaining that the kind of device capable of knocking out an entire neighborhood's wireless cameras is not something a casual criminal picks up at a hardware store. He said it is military-grade equipment, or close to it. That means whoever planned this either had access to specialized tools or connections to people who did. This was not a crime of impulse. This was a crime of engineering. Investigators also found something in the soil near the property. Volunteer groups, including Madres Buscadoras de Sonora, a Mexican organization that specializes in locating the disappeared, probed the ground near the home with metal rods. They found nothing conclusive, but the fact that a group with that specific expertise was brought in at all tells its own story about the fears investigators were quietly sitting with. A barrel was also pulled from a body of water near the neighborhood by true crime investigators doing unofficial searches. Law enforcement did not comment on it publicly. The silence around that discovery has been louder than anything the sheriff has said at a press conference. And yet, as of March 12, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nano stood in front of cameras and said he personally believes Nancy Guthrie is alive. He said investigators are getting closer. He did not say what they found. He did not say who they suspect. He just said closer. To understand why this case gripped the entire country from the very first day, you need to know one name: Savannah Guthrie. She is the co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, one of the most recognized faces in American morning television, and Nancy Guthrie is her mother. Savannah has been publicly vocal, painfully honest, and visibly broken throughout this ordeal, returning to the Today studio while her mother remains missing, because, as she put it, she did not know what else to do. Nancy Guthrie was living alone in an upscale neighborhood in Tucson. She depends on a walker, wears hearing aids, takes daily medication, and has a pacemaker. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, dropped her off after a family dinner at just before 10 at night. By 2 in the morning, she was gone. A doorbell camera captured a masked figure approaching her porch in the early hours of February 1st. The person wore gloves, carried a holstered gun, and had a specific black backpack on their back, a 25-liter Ozark trail bag sold exclusively at Walmart. Blood confirmed to be Nancy's was found on the front porch, the door, and the driveway. Her walker, her phone, her medication, her hearing aids, and her wallet were all still inside. She had been taken with nothing. What happened inside that home in those hours is something the FBI has been piecing together ever since, and what the forensic evidence suggests is far more chilling than the disappearance itself. The mysterious circumstances that have investigators baffled. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden examined the blood evidence on the porch. What he found was that the drops were donut-shaped, meaning they contained air mixed in from the nose or mouth. That specific pattern indicates the person was bleeding while being moved and that they were breathing in a labored way. Nancy was not unconscious when she was taken. She was alive, she was injured, and she was being carried. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell went further. She analyzed the blood spatter and pointed to the absence of what forensic analysts call void patterns. When a person walks through blood, they leave gaps in the drops where their feet landed. There were no such gaps at Nancy's home. O'Connell concluded that Nancy was wrapped in something and carried out, not walked out. Someone brought material specifically for that purpose. Inside the home, investigators recovered DNA that does not belong to Nancy or anyone in her immediate family. That DNA was run through CODIS, the FBI's national criminal database containing millions of profiles. It returned no match. Genetic genealogy, the same technique that cracked the Golden State Killer case, is now being considered as a path forward. That process involves building a family tree from partial DNA and working outward through ancestry databases to identify possible relatives of the unknown contributor. It is time-consuming. It is not guaranteed, but it has worked in cases where nothing else did. Then there were the gloves. Investigators and volunteers found 16 pairs of gloves in the area surrounding Nancy's home. Most of them were traced back to search team members. One pair found approximately 2 miles away generated genuine excitement among investigators. DNA analysis eventually connected those gloves to a restaurant worker with no known link to the case. A backpack was also recovered by searchers. It was the wrong brand, not the Ozark trail bag seen on the suspect's back in the doorbell footage. But the fact that it was found at all and that its DNA results have not been fully disclosed publicly has kept investigators and the public alike watching that thread very carefully. What no one is saying out loud is this. The unmatched DNA inside Nancy's home came from somewhere. It came from someone who was inside that space, and that person is still unidentified. The man on the porch and the photo that changed everything. From the moment doorbell camera footage emerged showing a masked figure at Nancy Guthrie's home, one question drove the investigation forward. Who is this person, and how many times had they been there before? The suspect appeared to be male, between 5'9" and 5'10" tall, and moved in a way that suggested physical confidence and prior planning. Then something shifted the investigation significantly. A second image emerged showing a man on Nancy's porch. But sources told NBC News that this second photo may have been taken on a completely different night than January 31st. Not the night of the abduction, an earlier date. That detail is critical because it suggests surveillance. Someone may have visited or watched the property before the night they took her. They were learning the layout. They were studying the routines. They knew exactly which camera to approach and how to block it. They knew enough to bring a Wi-Fi disrupting device if that theory holds. This was reconnaissance. A neighbor then came forward publicly and said that on January 11th, 3 weeks before the abduction, they saw a man near Nancy's home who simply did not belong. The neighbor described him as hunched over with his cap pulled low, lurking in a way that felt deeply out of place in that neighborhood. Investigators were already aware of this sighting. When they went back to ask for footage from January 11th specifically, it became clear they had been building a timeline of pre-abduction surveillance. TMZ received and later made public the contents of ransom notes sent in the case. Those notes contained a demand for Bitcoin payment. One retired FBI profiler studying the language of those notes noted something unusual. The term used for dollars was USD rather than just dollars or money, which is an uncommon phrasing for a native English speaker from that region. That linguistic detail quietly opened a new line of thinking that the person who wrote those notes may not be from America. A third note arrived at TMZ from a different Bitcoin wallet entirely. This one did not demand payment for Nancy herself. It offered, for a price of 1 Bitcoin at the time, worth around $66,000, the name of the person responsible. Investigators believe this note may have come from a separate individual entirely, perhaps someone on the periphery of the crime who knew something and saw an opportunity. The family responded publicly on February 7th with a statement that said simply, "We received your message and we understand. We will pay." There has been no verified proof of life. Not a single confirmed photograph, recording, or communication from Nancy herself has surfaced in over 40 days. Then comes the most twisted part. Kash Patel walked into this case and everything got complicated. When the FBI director himself gets personally involved in a local kidnapping case, it means one of two things. Either the case is genuinely extraordinary, or someone is using it for something beyond finding a missing person. On February 10th, just 10 days after Nancy vanished, FBI Director Kash Patel posted 4 doorbell camera images of the masked suspect directly onto his personal X account under the handle FBI Director Kash. He then went on Fox News with Sean Hannity and announced that the FBI had persons of interest and that substantial progress had been made. He framed it as a victory in the making. Former FBI official Christopher O'Leary responded publicly and did not hold back. He called Patel's comments incredibly inappropriate and said that his lack of investigative experience was really costing victims. The criticism centered on a core principle of kidnapping investigations. When you have footage of a suspect and you are trying to identify them, you do not broadcast that footage on social media before you are ready. You risk alerting the suspect. You risk contaminating the investigation. You risk the life of the person being held. There was also the question of at least one image Patel shared that sources said was captured on a different night than the abduction. Whether that was an investigative error or a deliberate choice, no one has answered publicly. Shortly after Patel's Fox News appearance, a delivery driver named Carlos was pulled over in a traffic stop. He was taken in and questioned for 8 full hours. He was released. He had nothing to do with the case. Whether his detention was a direct result of the public release of that footage is something investigators have not confirmed, but the timing was noted by everyone watching. Then came the revelation that exposed just how fractured the investigation had become. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos sent Nancy's DNA evidence to a private laboratory in Florida rather than to the FBI's Quantico facility. That decision effectively cut Kash Patel's FBI out of the loop on one of the most critical pieces of forensic evidence in the case. The Daily Beast reported that the FBI was blocked from accessing that evidence entirely. A former FBI official described the situation as an extraordinary breakdown in interagency cooperation during an active kidnapping case. Brian Driscoll, who would normally lead the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group in a case of this magnitude, had been removed from his position by Patel. The person who should have been coordinating the federal response was simply gone. Patel also drew criticism for traveling to Milan for a hockey game, while the investigation was still in its most active early phase. In response to the controversy, a joint task force was eventually formed in early March. 4 Pima County Sheriff's detectives and 1 sergeant relocated to the FBI's Tucson field office. Reporter Brian Enton noted they appeared to be working well together. But the FBI had already begun reducing its Tucson personnel, and the volume of tips flowing in had dropped significantly from the tens of thousands that poured in during the first 2 weeks. The FBI is not working on one angle. They are working 6 simultaneously. And each one, if true, points to a completely different kind of criminal. 6 theories and a suspect. Nobody has named, retired. FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has been the most vocal about her top theory. She believes this crime required insider knowledge. Not necessarily someone from inside the family, but someone who had been inside the orbit of the household. A caregiver, a cleaning service, a medical worker, someone who knew Nancy lived alone, knew her schedule, knew the layout, and passed that information to whoever carried out the abduction. Coffin Daffer has said publicly that she believes this was not a stranger who randomly chose an elderly woman's home. The level of preparation was too precise. The ransom theory is complicated by the absence of proof of life. In a professional kidnapping for ransom, you typically receive communication from the victim quickly. You hear their voice. You see a photograph with a date visible. None of that has happened. Retired agents have noted that this is either because the kidnappers are unusually sophisticated or because something went wrong that they have not been willing to communicate. The cartel angle has been floated, given that Tucson sits close to the U.S.-Mexico border and southern Arizona is known territory for trafficking routes. However, investigators told NBC News early in the case that there was no current evidence Nancy had been taken across the border into Mexico. Experienced organized crime analysts have also pointed out that cartel kidnappings almost always involve a known debt, a business dispute, or a territorial conflict. None of those elements appear present here. The personal grievance theory, raised by former FBI agent Brad Garrett on Fox News, suggests someone took Nancy specifically because of an unresolved conflict. Not for money, not randomly, but because of something that happened, something that was never settled, something that festered into this. Garrett noted the case lacks the clean financial logic of a professional operation, which suggests emotion may be driving at least part of it. The sixth theory, that this was random and opportunistic, has been consistently rated as the least likely by every expert who has spoken publicly. The premeditation visible in the footage, the possible surveillance visits, the disabled cameras, the specific equipment brought to the scene. None of that is consistent with a crime of chance. What no one has said, but what hangs over every press conference and every leaked FBI briefing, is that somewhere in Tucson, or connected to Tucson, someone knows exactly what happened to Nancy Guthrie on the night of January 31st. And that person has been walking free for over 40 days. There are two battles being fought over the Nancy Guthrie case right now. One is the investigation itself. The other is the war over the story of the investigation, and that second war may be doing just as much damage as the first. The truth nobody is saying. Word of mouth and social media are flooded with unverified claims about this case. Stories claim Nancy's body was discovered in a pond. Stories claiming her daughter Annie was arrested. Stories claiming son-in-law Tommaso Cioni was surrounded by police at his home. Stories claiming a video shows the exact moment Nancy was taken off her street. Every single one of those claims has been fact-checked and debunked. Snopes investigated the pond story and confirmed it used footage from Hennepin County, Minnesota, and a fire department response in Switzerland. The Pima County Sheriff's Department released a direct statement saying that the specific video was not filmed in their jurisdiction. Fox News reported that Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos resigned from the El Paso Police Department in 1982 rather than face termination following disciplinary issues that included an excessive force allegation. That history was not part of his public record when he was elected sheriff. He has now been sued for $1 million in connection with his handling of the Guthrie investigation. He responded to the Fox News report and defended his background. But the story added another layer of public skepticism to an investigation that was already facing questions about coordination and competence. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show in late February. She spoke honestly about the fear that had been living in her chest for weeks. She said her mother may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have already gone home to the Lord. And then she said, "We still believe in a miracle." Sheriff Nanos said the investigators are getting closer. He said he believes she is alive. And somewhere, in a lab in Florida or a field office in Tucson, someone is holding a piece of this case that has not yet made it into a press conference. If anything in this case made you stop and think, or if you have been following this from the beginning and noticed something we did not cover, drop it in the comments below, because this story is still unfolding and every perspective matters right now.